Welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Naked Founder podcast, the business podcast where nothing is hidden. Thank you to our sponsors, Financial, the home of money for women. Our guest today is Adam Ward, CEO and co-founder of Airtime Rewards, which is on target to hit 40 million turnover this year. Adam dropped out of his law degree after making a small fortune from a mobile website that he built during his studies. However, life threw him two big curveballs. The first was when his son Max was diagnosed with a genetic condition called Angelman syndrome, and the second was when all of Airtime Rewards' money was tied up in Silicon Valley Bank when the bank suddenly collapsed, which made for a sleepless weekend. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks very much for having me today.
No, delighted to have you. And this is your first ever podcast, so we're going to go easy on you, Adam. Adam, we always start every episode of the Naked Founder podcast with the same question. What didn't they tell you about founding a business that you wish you'd known at the start?
That's a good question. I think everybody, when you're talking about starting a new business, people talk about strategy, they talk about funding, they talk about growth, product market fit. No one really prepares you for what all of that means when you actually start doing it, the psychological weight of it all. And I think people underestimate actually how hard it actually is to do all of that. There are moments in business where you go from feeling really unstoppable and moments where you question, are you doing the right thing? And I think those swings can happen in the same week. But it's really, really tough, and it can be really, really lonely as well.
Those swings can happen in the same day. I don't know about the same week, but that's the life of a founder. Adam, there are a lot of places that I can start, but I want to take you back to 2023. Every founder's worst nightmare. You've worked on Airtime Rewards for over a decade. You've got all of Airtime Rewards' money was tied up in Silicon Valley Bank. You know, you're feeling okay about yourself. Suddenly, Silicon Valley Bank collapses, and you've got all your money tied up in there. And those of us who are old enough to remember Northern Rock can still visualize and still remember the queues outside with people trying to take their money out the Northern Rock. Just tell us what happened and how you dealt with it.
Yeah, I mean, it was coming on 3 years to the day actually when it actually happened, and it's probably one of the events that you can never really plan for. Typically, when businesses run out of money, it's been happening for a while, and you run out of runway. But this event happened very, very quickly. It's probably the hardest things to put into the emotional context that we went through during that weekend. But 1 minute you're scaling your business, and the next you're watching a bank collapse with all of your money in it, and it was pretty difficult, pretty emotional weekend.
I remember watching it actually because I wrote a story about it, but obviously it kicked off in the US very quickly, went over into the UK as well, but it was changing by the hour, and it was Friday night, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, it all happened on a Friday, and we were still in COVID, so we were still working at home quite a lot. And our finance director messaged me an article from the Daily Mail, which was basically a story around the US, the big parent company of SVB. Was having problems, and there was a good chance it was going to go into liquidation. They just put the results out, and they weren't looking very, very good. And it very, very quickly snowballed as to is it going to affect us in the UK? What does that mean for us? And we remember trying to get into the bank account, online banking on the Friday afternoon, and sometimes you could get in it, sometimes you couldn't. But what they'd done is they'd stop you withdrawing money, and what had happened is there'd been a run on the bank, so people had seen the article in the US, put two and two together, and decided to act on it and try to pull the money out, and the UK arm of the bank had basically put a stop on that happening. Friday evening it came about, and news had come out that the US arm had been put into administration, and that they'd frozen all the deposits. And then pretty quickly the same happened to the UK business. We were basically told that the bank, there was no public interest in the bank in the UK. It wasn't critical to the UK sort of financial infrastructure, and pretty much the same thing was going to happen into the UK. So we went to bed on the Friday night.
Did you go to bed on Friday night?
We managed to get some sleep, but we knew we had to come up with a plan around how do we manage moving forward, no longer being able to access the money in our bank. Saturday morning came round, and the news had got even worse, and the government weren't going to do anything about it. Again, back to the fact that this was a non-public facing bank. It was only there really for startups. But during the course of Saturday, the tech industry had pretty much rallied round. About 30 to 40% of the UK startups, most of the investors, most of the private equity businesses all banked with SVB. And we'd basically put a case together for the UK Treasury, UK Bank of England, that actually if what was about to played out, there'd be a massive issue with all of the startups and the tech industry for the UK and what that meant. So Saturday started off really, really depressing, and us coming up with plans and how do we pay staff? How do we tell our staff actually what happened? Made it even worse than that. Josh, our co-founder, was skiing in Mont Blanc, so we were doing all of this over Teams, trying to come up with all different models of what our cash flow would look like. We knew we had money coming in at the month end, but ultimately Saturday was about lobbying the government to try and step in to save what was one of the biggest assets in the UK with the tech scene. And
this is what people don't realise with founders, though. There's some of the stuff you've got to deal with. I mean, there was a happy ending in the end. And just tell us what the happy ending was, because you went back to work on Monday and your staff wouldn't have known what you'd been through.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we were planning not only for the worst, but also how do we deliver this message to our team? Most of which none of them really knew what was going on. We went into work on Monday, or we knew we had to go into work on Monday with a plan to tell the staff. This might have included not necessarily being able to pay the wages. Would we need to close the business? But fortunately, we went back into work on Monday, and the bank had been bought by HSBC. They were guaranteeing all the deposits, so our money was safe. So it was almost like it didn't really happen. And I think related to running a business, finding a business, you carry a lot of weight, and your staff don't necessarily understand and know some of the things that go on, and people just carry on, and that's what happened on the Monday. We didn't tell our staff what had happened. A few people asked later in the day, but we'd finished the day with access to our money again. And it taught us a huge lesson around treasury management, something, again, you don't necessarily plan for in a business, but we have a policy now for how we manage our money, split between banks, and hopefully it doesn't happen again.
No, and that's the thing that people don't see as well. You mentioned the fact, you talk about weight. You've lost a lot of weight yourself, actually. You've lost about 25 kilos. You're on a bit of a health fitness regime, and you're doing fantastic and looking fantastic for it as well. I'm going to take you back again, actually, to your childhood. Now, I think your parents, like all parents, wanted the best for their children. They were hoping you were going to embark on a career as an accountant, but you actually embarked on a law degree at university, but left after 2 years. Tell us what happened.
I absolutely loved studying law when I was back in college, and going back quite a while now. And when I was in sixth form, law was one of my most favourite subjects, and I did really well at it, and I could absolutely see me becoming a lawyer. My parents had a slightly different plan for me. They were hell bent on me becoming an accountant for some reason, and did force me to go and do work experience at an accountant.
Were they accountants themselves?
No. My parents both worked at the NHS. So my mum was head of midwifery for the north of England. My dad was a research scientist over at St Mary's. So both had worked for the NHS all of their lives, but for some reason they had a different plan for me, which was to become an accountant. And I went to university to study accountancy, and lasted a couple of days before I plucked up the courage to tell my parents that this wasn't going to be for me, and I was coming home to have a year out, and I was going to go and study law the year later.
You did that, but you left after 2 years because you're a bit of a computer geek. Yeah, a bit of a you're a programmer, a creator. How would you describe yourself?
Yeah, so during that year out, I taught myself how to code. And looking back on everything we've achieved, I think it was one of the best things I ever did, because running a tech business now, I understand how things work, and I understand how to build software. And I'd done that while I was on a year out before I'd gone to university. But for me, university was a great experience.
Which one did you go to?
I went to Central Lancashire.
Yeah.
Which had a really, really good law department. And I did everything that everybody else did at university. I lived there during the week, but where I was different is I always went home at weekend to work at Tesco, and nobody else that I lived with at university had any worry about money or wanting to work, and it was all about drinking. But for me, I wanted to earn money, and it was something that really, really got my attention at university. Was how do I start making money, and that's what got me to think about business, and how can I spend my time between lectures and studying and actually come up with something and build something. And having spent the year previously writing software, this whole new world of the internet was starting, and I really wanted to focus a lot of my time on that. And it's that took my attention away from studying law and making money.
You made some software that created mobile ringtones. It's the funny thing is that people talk about it now, but back then when you were at university, it was still quite new, wasn't it?
It was massively new. I mean, we were all running around with Nokia phones. There was no iPhones. There was no Androids. The concept of being able to text somebody on a network was something really, really new and crazy. And that sort of shows you how early it was. But
I still remember my first text message. No word of a lie. I'd covered a case, a pretty horrible case actually, a paedophile gang in Bristol. And I wrote this background article which went in the Bristol Evening Post, and I got a text message from the investigating police officer to say what a good article he thought it was, and thank you very much. But that was my first ever text message. So for the younger listeners and viewers out there, that's what it meant. So you created this software that created ringtones. Pretty quickly you were making a shed load of money, weren't you?
Yeah. So off the back of the text message systems, Nokia had released a piece of software that allowed you to ultimately create logos and ringtones and send them over the mobile network systems. And that was the first website that I created at university. It was a website called nokialogos.co.uk, and it was basically a very, very simple website where you could come on and you could choose to replace the logo on your phone from saying BT Cellnet to maybe having a Nike tick or a Adidas logo, and I'd built a way in which people could ring up and pay for that. So I'd go out to university during the day, and then I'd come back in the evening to a load of orders that people had rung up and left and paid for through their phone. And then I'd send the logos out, and I'd carried on working on that software while I was at university and automated the whole process. So I was then going to university in the day, making money while I was there, and then not having to do anything in the evening. So we reached a point in time where I had to make a decision. Do I focus on the third year of university and coming out with a law degree, or actually doubling down on the time that I spent on the business and going on a slightly different journey?
What did your parents say when you told them that you were, knocking your law degree on the head?
I think they were pretty shocked, to be honest. Obviously, neither of them were technical, so they couldn't really understand exactly what I was doing. I think they were happy that I was happy doing something that I like to do. They could see obviously the benefits and the output of all of the time and effort. I remember a new car arriving and my dad asking me how I'd paid for that. So I think they knew deep down that I'd made the right decision. And obviously today's a bit of a different story.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Airtime Rewards in a second. I think you sold your first business, Wapfly Technologies, to 2Ergo. Would it be fair to say that first business, bit of a lifestyle business?
It absolutely was. Nobody had taught me really how to run a business. I hadn't studied business at university. I dropped out of university to focus on building this business from what I'd set up from the university days. And it was 22 when I left university to focus on it, and I was still young. I'd moved the business to Manchester, took our co-founder on, but we just made it work. We were in a very, very early market. We were building a really, really good team. We probably lacked a little bit of discipline, everything you'd expect to be able to do now, everything that we do now in terms of governance, but we just made it work, and we were always winning business. We were always making money. We never really had any management accounts, but it just worked. And
it's fun. It's fun though, wasn't it?
It was absolutely fun, but it was in the era where you didn't go and raise money first. You got a business off the ground, and you did it to generate profit and survive. That was the only real way of growing.
That's like, I hear a lot of founder stories now, and they found a business, and then within 3 months they go out to try and raise. They've not necessarily got a minimum viable product, not got traction's a word you hear a lot, not got any traction. So in 2014, you founded a business that is now Airtime Rewards. At the time, it was called Karrot with a K. How does it work? What problem were you trying to fix when you started what was then Karrot, now Airtime Rewards?
So we'd worked in mobile for a long time, and having moved the business on from selling ringtones and logos, the whole new world of mobile apps came about in 2007, and we'd been acquired by 2Ergo, and we'd spent an awful lot of time working with retailers and mobile networks on loyalty and rewards. The business 2Ergo was known for its product that Orange Wednesdays was one of the biggest loyalty programs that 2Ergo had built and run. I spent a lot of time working on that and understanding some of the challenges around mobile network loyalty, but more importantly, retail loyalty. And we built an awful lot of retail products and advised a lot of retailers on their strategy to acquire customers and retain customers. And 2014, mobile apps were one of the main things people were spending money on and engaging with. So we left to Ergo to focus purely on resolving two major pain points in retail loyalty and rewards. And the first problem we wanted to solve was the lack of technology. Historically, a loyalty program for a retailer was built around carrying a plastic card that you swiped at the till, and you collected some points, and that typically was it. There was not a lot of emotion in it, and consumers had been programmed to do this action at the till and not really get much value. It was the retailer that was winning. So we wanted to solve that challenge with Airtime Rewards, but then more importantly, what drove consumers to spend with retailers. And again, this concept of earning points and not really being able to do anything with those points caused a real problem. And we wanted to change that. And Airtime Rewards was set up on the foundation that we wanted to be a technology business at heart, but ultimately become the champion of the consumer in terms of what motivated them and incentivized them to spend with retailers. And I think we've done a really, really good job at that.
Yeah, I think you've done a really good job as well. And I mean, Airtime Rewards today works with more than 200 retailers. You've got millions of users. You've won countless awards as well. Just give us a few metrics to talk about the scale of Airtime Rewards today.
So we celebrated our 10th birthday last year, which I think is a huge milestone for anybody. Taking a concept on a blank piece of paper to.
Was it last year? Because I thought you founded the business 2014.
2014 was when we left to Ergo, and we probably started the foundations for what Airtime was going to be. We didn't launch until 2016.
Right, okay. So you're 10 years old, and just give a sense of the scale.
We're a team of about 85 people now. I run the business with Josh, my co-founder, who I met to Ergo. We have offices in Manchester, in the city centre. We have our sales and marketing team in London, just outside Covent Garden. Like you said,
why do you have I know Josh, your co-founder, is based in London. You live up in the northwest as well. Why have you got the office in Manchester and the sales function in London?
Early on in our journey, we won a place on an accelerator program called Wire. It's probably not widely known in Manchester, but it's run by Telefonica, who own O2 in the UK. We won that as part of a prize we won for the Northern Stars, which was a Manchester awards initiative, which was a massive part of our early sort of journey winning that. But they gave us office space in Piccadilly in London, and they sort of consumed us into Telefonica Digital as part of the accelerator program. So Josh was already working and living in London when we found the business, so it was a natural step to keep Josh in London and go to Wire for 9 months and live within Telefonica's ecosystem, and it's never really changed since then. No. We built our business off us having 2 locations and Josh being in London.
Just talk about Josh, the co-founder, because choosing the right co-founder can make a business. Choosing the wrong co-founder, it can break a business as well. So just explain that dynamic between you and Josh.
So Josh is 10 years younger than me, which really, really helps. We're both quite different people, and I think that's a massive part of choosing someone to set up a business with is having complementary skills. Someone to keep you honest, someone to keep you accountable. And Josh's skill set is something that I don't have, and vice versa. So it's massively important to get the right co-founder. Josh is brilliant at getting into detail. I'm very, very good at high level, and I tend to focus a lot of my time on strategy, whereas Josh focuses a lot on execution and getting into detail and working with the teams. My
co-founder, my business partner, Jonathan Simcox, he's 8.5 years my junior as well. So that sort of, but I'm 53, he's 45. I mean, I'd like to say we've got the same taste in music, but we haven't. It's horrendous, his choice in music as well. That because there's almost a whole generation between you in a way. So how have you got stuff in common, but also got that, that thing that makes you different?
I think whilst there's 10 years between us, I think we've both grown up in the generation where smartphones is the de facto thing you leave the house with, and most of your engagement during the day is done through your phone. So I think we're quite aligned in terms of that. We're also massively aligned on the vision of what we're trying to do, and I think whilst there's an age gap there, We've got a huge shared passion for what we're trying to do, what success looks like. And I think we're complementing each other very, very well. I think it's really important having a co-founder. It's very lonely. And having somebody that you can bounce ideas off and ring at 10 o'clock at night if there's a problem. We've been through our fair amount of problems over the years. I don't think the age actually causes too much of a problem. It's being aligned and sharing the same vision.
No, I agree with you. When you're phoning somebody at 6:30 in the morning and you're phoning somebody at 10 o'clock at night, and you don't feel bad about it because you need to talk about something that's important to the business, then that's who you ring. You mentioned earlier a lot of startups, especially now, they look to raise investment very, very quickly as well. You're interesting because you've largely bootstrapped the business. You got it to a scale now, like I say, 40 million turnover this year. In 2018, Maven led on a £1 million fundraise. Was it a deliberate decision to, by and large, not raise investment?
It definitely was, yeah. It definitely was. We took money off Maven as part of a £1 million round in 2018. At the same time, Wire, Telefonica got involved as well. We didn't want to be dependent on continuously fundraising, and it's really, really hard continuously raising money. It's a skill in itself. We wanted to focus on building a sustainable business, and I think it's a different approach when you start with that mindset of becoming independent and being able to stand on your own 2 feet. We wanted to become profitable as soon as we could do, and that wasn't at the detriment of growth. I think we've grown very, very well over the last 10 years. But becoming profitable gives you control. It allows you to make the right decisions based on what you want to do. It gives you options, and it also makes you plan your business, not necessarily live into the next funding round, which is what a lot of businesses do.
And you presumably managed to protect a reasonable chunk of equity for you and Josh as well.
Yeah, which was hugely important for us. Profitability gets lost in a lot of startups, but we've not been diluted down and down and down through numerous rounds.
You see some founders who are on their 4th or 5th fundraise, and they've got like 6-7% of the business.
That's right. Your question was, it worth it?
Yeah.
Going to an earlier point about it being really, really hard. You've got to be doing it for a reason, and a lot of the time, founders are doing it because they want to become financially stable and independent after it. And I think you can get too wrapped up in raising money and not necessarily focusing on building a good, profitable business with a good model. And you can benefit from your cap table and having control from a percentage point of view.
I think I might be saying that you've turned down 4 or 5 trade deals from people wanting to buy your business as well, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, over the years we've had a number of approaches and serious conversations with businesses that were interested in acquiring Airtime. It's never really been about trying to build something for us just to sell it. From day one, the focus has been on building something sustainable, something profitable, with a product that generally works for both members and retailers. And we've always been quite disciplined about the opportunities we look at. A lot of the approaches that we've had over the years have been pretty flattering. When you look at them properly, they've either come to us too early in our journey, or they don't align with what we're trying to do, our long-term vision for the business.
But you'd never need to work again.
Yeah, some of the offers we've turned down would mean I'd never need to work again. And sometimes the wife blames me for turning some of them away.
But that's why it's so important that you and your co-founder and you and your wife are on the same page.
That's right. I mean, we both work. Rebecca still works. She understands the sacrifices you give up as an owner of a business, and for us, it's all about the next few years in the business and continue to grow, and there'll definitely be another event.
A lot of founders say their perspective changes when they have children, and that's certainly true for you. You've got 2 children, and your son Max was diagnosed with a very rare genetic condition called Angelman syndrome. Just tell us what Angelman syndrome is, but how does that impact on you, your business, and your family?
So Angelman syndrome is a very, very rare neurogenetic disorder. Not many people have heard about it, like you say. It affects about 1 in 500,000 people across the world.
Amazing.
And it's caused by a loss of a function to one of your chromosomes, chromosome 15, which is responsible for your body's ability to communicate. What that means is there's a protein missing in your body which manages communication, and that's not just speech. It's about you wanting your leg to move or your arm to move, and it's that causes specific challenges within Max.
How old is Max now?
Max is 5 this weekend. And to give you an idea of some of the challenges that we face as a family, he can't walk. He's only just learning to sit up. He's missed a huge amount of sort of developmental milestones, which is all caused by Angelman syndrome. Typically, children with Angelman syndrome have very little speech. You class them as non-verbal, and we use other ways of communication at home. So Max has a symbol book, which will at some point become an iPad, and he uses that to form sentences. But ultimately, Angelman syndrome is a lifelong condition. There's no cure for it. One of the symptoms of Angelman syndrome is epilepsy. It tends to come with it. And Max has something called absence epilepsy. So whilst he doesn't have full-blown seizures, you can be playing with him on the floor, or he can be having his tea, and he'll basically have an absence, which is a moment of unconsciousness, where his body will just stop. And that is literally his brain being overloaded with multiple things trying to happen at the same time. And rather than, we just deal with it and manage it, Max's brain can't do that. So it just switches off, and it's like he's just collapsed. And that's one of the biggest risks for him as a 5-year-old at the moment, is just managing that.
Because you could collapse, bang your head.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. So he spends a lot of his time playing on the floor. He has a walker to help him walk. And he's one of the most happiest, friendliest little boys you'll ever meet.
I've seen the photos of him. He's always got a smile on his face. And you set up the Max Ward Foundation. So what was the reason for that?
So when we got Max's diagnosis, we went through this very, very emotional phase as a family of not actually really having any support. There's no support given to you by the NHS. I remember the diagnosis day, which is what everyone refers to when you've got children with special needs, when you find the inevitable out. It wasn't really planned. I remember my wife got a phone call from the consultant secretary asking us to come in to see the consultant. There was no context given at all as to why we needed to come in, and I was actually in London on the day of it. So I remember taking a call off Rebecca while I was on loudspeaker, sat in the consultant's room, and we were literally told over the course of a 5-minute appointment that the reason why Max was having all of these challenges and problems, and why he'd been in hospital so much, was because of this genetic condition they'd tested for, and he'd got. And we were literally given the diagnosis of Angelman syndrome. You can imagine the outburst of tears from my wife and her mum, who was there in the appointment, and I was sat in my car trying to take it all in and understand what that meant. And we were literally left the appointment with a pamphlet to say what Angelman syndrome was, how my son would be over the next few years, and what it would mean from a life perspective, and that was it.
It's incredible to hear that. But the reason of setting up the Max Ward Foundation, what was the reason behind that?
Yeah, so we set up the foundation basically to help support families who had been through what we'd been through from Max's diagnosis. And the foundation exists to reduce the isolation that parents and families are put in once they get their own diagnosis, and to create a bit more hope and momentum for those people who are going through it. And to give others access to information and resources from people who've actually gone through the journey. So beyond awareness, which is part of the reason we set the business up, the charity up, sorry, it's about practical impact, supporting therapies, providing money to families for things like equipment, stuff that you generally don't get from the NHS.
It's incredible what you've done. Incredible what you've done. Have you got a network of other parents whose children have got Angelman syndrome?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things we did was connect with other families, other children, and we used Instagram for that quite a lot, was to find parents who are in the same sort of situation as us. And we know a huge amount now of families who have got children who are in the same position as us. We've been privileged to go to America to go to the Angelman conferences over in Miami. And they're run by Colin Farrell, the actor. If you know Colin Farrell,
yeah.
His son's got Angelman syndrome as well. But for us, it's all about support. It's all about surrounding yourself with people who've been through the same experience and leaning on those experiences as well.
Is there any overlap between that situation and business?
I think getting a diagnosis and having a child with special needs, I think there definitely is with business. You tend to cut out a lot of noise. You tend to focus on, or it forces you to focus on things that you're in control of, and things that you can change, and not necessarily just wait for stuff to happen. I think there's a huge amount of overlap. It definitely allows you to focus more on the importance of either business or what's going on at home.
It's amazing, lad. It's amazing what you and your wife have done as well with the foundation. I'm going to take you back to Airtime Rewards. You launched Airtime Rewards. You expanded into Germany. You took that decision to pull out and focus on the UK, which is interesting, isn't it? What was the reason behind that?
Yeah, so we launched in Germany last year, and it was a really, really good experience for us. Obviously, as businesses, the next stage of growth always comes from, moving out of the UK and launching internationally, and that was a huge amount of our aspiration when we set the business up, was to become international. But we decided to stop our expansion into Germany last year and just refocus on the UK. Germany was a great market for us, but what we learned quickly is that launching in a new country is almost like starting a business again. And to do it properly, you need to really, really invest. You need local teams, you need local retailer relationships, and the economics of the business in a new market. They take time to build and stack up. And we looked at the opportunity in the UK and our growth in the UK, and we realised that we had more opportunity to double down in the UK. There was more ability for us to generate profit by doing more in the UK, and it would come quickly, a lot quicker than launching in a new market. Our product was working. We had huge retailer relationships. So our focus at the moment is just to continue to focus on the UK.
Adam, we've known each other for a long time, and one of the refreshing things was that for a long time you weren't a runner, and I wouldn't say you were unhealthy, but you weren't somebody obsessed about going to the gym and all of that stuff as well. Now you've gone full circle. So how old are you now, Adam?
I'm 46 this year.
46, yeah. You follow each other on Instagram. You go running. You've lost 25 kilos in weight. You do 18,000 and 20,000 steps every day. Why did you decide to do that for? And have you taken that into business?
I definitely have, yeah. I've realised that in order for me to be able to show up properly with Max and support the family, I needed to be healthy. And I think when you've got a child with additional needs, your demands become so different. I'm probably as guilty as everybody in terms of not necessarily focusing on myself. And whilst we've got a lovely house and we've got a great business and we're successful, it's very easy to forget about what happens when you're not here. And health is a massive deciding factor as to how long we're around on this earth. And if I'm to support Max and the family as much as I can do, then I need to be the best possible version of myself. And I think a lot of founders fall into that trap. You're so focused on the business and all of your responsibility that sometimes you forget about you.
When you're on a plane and they say to you, in the event of an accident, the air mask come down, put the air mask on yourself first, as opposed to your family, which would be a natural temptation. Right. And as a founder of a business, it's so easy to think of other people before you look after yourself as well. So by looking after yourself, you're looking after them in the long run. And has it made you better as a founder, as a business person?
Yeah, it definitely has. Yeah. When Max was diagnosed, just going back to that, it does shift your perspective. There are moments in life when you realise just how little control you've got over certain outcomes. You can't control the medical diagnosis, and just in business you can't control the market, you can't control the bank collapsing, but you can control how you respond to all of that. And I think health is a massive deciding factor.
Have you got an exit strategy for Airtime Rewards?
Right now we're focused on growth ahead of us, so our heads are down. We do have shareholders who we're accountable to, and at some point will look for us to exit and return some of their money. But for now, it's about building the business, focusing on the UK. Obviously, we're not averse to companies contacting us. We get that quite a lot, but it's got to be really, really right for Josh and I. But for the next 2 to 3 years, we're focused on back to growth.
Okay. this is the Naked Founder podcast. We always end with the same question. There's a tradition in the US where the outgoing president will write a letter to his or her successor. If you were writing a letter of advice to yourself for day one of a business or to another founder, what would you say?
I think a couple of things really. Firstly, back to my early point around getting a co-founder. The journey of setting up a business and then running the business and executing on a plan, it can be really, really lonely. And no one really tells you that at the start. I think also there are numerous stats to prove that more successful businesses are the ones with two co-founders, which is probably really, really obvious. The decisions you carry, doubts you absorb, pressure you shield others from, and I think doing that alone can be really difficult and heavy. So I think firstly, get a co-founder, get someone that you can deeply trust, someone who can challenge you, and you can be challenged by, someone you can bounce ideas off. Businesses will change, market will change, you change, but having the right person alongside you can be hugely beneficial. And also, you're going to need resilience.
Key word, the R word, resilience. Listen, Adam, thanks very much for being so open and really speaking about some really personal issues in your life as well. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to our sponsor, Financial, the home of money for women. That's all for this episode of the Naked Founder podcast. If you like the podcast, tell your friends and family to subscribe. My name, as always, is Chris Maguire. Thank you.